with this, but I'm not the only one talking about it. This is what's great about social media. This is what's great about these spaces, going on places like YouTube, going to places like Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok. I don't really like TikTok or go there, but you can go there and check out what's happening in the news and what's happening about a lot of these stories. And one guy that I'm bringing on today, one guy that I've been watching for some time, who's been talking about these stories, talking about what's happening on the streets here in Canada, and really how many people, the thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about, he's been going on about and bringing the story to the forefront and doing it in a way that's digestible, a way that really brings people to a position of being more informed, because, well, guess what? The traditional media is not informing us. They're not telling us the story. They're not telling us what's going on. So I want to introduce to you today, Harrison Faulkner. Thank you so much for joining me today. And you guys just put out a piece recently, you and Lauren Southern, on Tenet Media. And I was actually really blown away by how you presented the story. Thank you for making that, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Clyde, thanks for having me. I was just watching the show before you came in, and I think I heard you say that it was your birthday today.
It's my birthday, yeah.
Oh, right on. Well, happy birthday, and it's nice to join you to be able to talk about this. As you point out, I think mass immigration is the most important issue facing this country. It's the most important issue facing young Canadians, regardless of wherever you come from or whatever background you're faced with, however much money you have, this issue impacts you. It's not just about housing, it's about our culture, it's about everything else. So it really is the most important issue, and I'm always happy to speak with you about it.
Well, it's crazy. It's a big issue, and it's divided a lot of people on different avenues. And this is why I wanted to bring you on, because I really appreciated the coverage that you gave. You're showing a lot of the hard-hitting issues, and of course, everyone wants to jump to the conclusion that, hey, you've got some sort of racial prejudice because you're talking about this story. But what you did was you showed that there's so many victims on the other side. It's not just a case that Canadians. The average Canadian's a victim of mass immigration and, the jobs and housing market getting flooded. But these people are also getting scammed in order to come here in the first place.
That's right. So, of course, there are victims on all sides of this. I think that telling the story without acknowledging that is disingenuous. And I also think, however, if we're going to look at who the victims are that we really ought to care about, ultimately, that would be the Canadian people here in this. That does not mean that there aren't international students who are being victimized, who are being scammed. And I think the piece does a good job at highlighting that. Let's just look into some of the ways this happens. Of course, we've heard about the fake admissions letters. My immediate gut reaction is that some of them probably knew they were fake letters, and some of them didn't know they were fake letters and were genuinely duped, if you will. You also have these completely fake colleges, which we all know about, that are not colleges at all. Some of them have one actual staff. It's ridiculous. There aren't even classrooms. Some of these colleges are in strip malls in Brampton and Mississauga. So they are tricked into believing that they're going to some legitimate campus when they're not even going to what could even be described as a school, let alone a college. So yeah, I mean, look, and then of course, what are these students faced with when it comes to living, right? Where are they living? With what money? They don't have a lot of money, and some of them are living 5 to a room, 5 to a kitchen. I've heard stories of people actually putting up tents inside of their houses and renting those tents out for hundreds of dollars a month. So what that does, of course, is it sets off a string of problems that are faced by these students, but it also has trickle-out impact on Canadians, young Canadians trying to get into the rental market, trying to get into the housing market. It really does. All roads lead back to this being a major problem with no benefit at all to young Canadians. And that's why I think this issue is so important. And that's why we're starting to see, Clyde, just how much this issue is gripping the online dialogue in this country. everyone is talking about it. Everybody that I've spoken to that's a young Canadian thinks the same way. It's the biggest issue. So it's really come to dominate our politics and our social discourse, and for good reason.
Well, like I said, if you bring it to the light, the quick way of dismissing it is you're some sort of bigot, right? And that's the way they like to dismiss this. Obviously, the liberals don't want to talk about it because they brought this about. This is a story about failed policy. This is a story about finding loopholes in laws, calling what was it? Mark Miller called them a very lucrative asset. I mean, that's not how we talk about people. As far as I recall, growing up in Canada, we were always very compassionate people. People aren't considered assets or lucrative at that. But we're in a situation where it looks like it's the end of the summer job for Canadian kids. It's completely we're bringing in people that claim themselves students, but they're not gaining skills. They don't come with skills. They're not learning skills. They're coming with no experience, and they're flooding the market of entry level positions. How is that going to work out for the future?
I think you're right that it is, at this point, it's the end of the summer job as we know it. And a lot of young Canadian kids are going to struggle to break into the job market. They're going to struggle to get into a job market, which, as you point out, allows you to build up enough money, allows you to build up experience to get yourself into a better career, into a better job, and that job would allow you to get a house. So think about it. It's a serious, serious issue. Ultimately, what needs to happen is this program needs to be completely wiped out of Canada. We can't have this right now. We're not in a position to be opening up our student visa system when we know what the consequences are going to be and when we know the situation faced by young Canadians. Maybe in 20 years, 15 years, the situation might allow for us to be giving out hundreds of thousands, upwards of 1 million active student visas. But right now, we can't do that when Canadians are struggling, when Canadians are the ones who are having to deal with this problem. And so ultimately, this cap that the federal government has put in place, which is going to bring down the numbers to around still just a bit higher than what the numbers were before Trudeau came to office. That's going to be the cap that's going to be put in place. That's still going to cause a lot of problems for us. That's still going to be around 300,000 student visas next year. Okay, so this is a major issue, and we can't also just allow the people that are here who have expiring permits and no skills to stay. One of the things that the issue that we're seeing right now, Clyde, is a large number of these students have expiring permits. They know that their time in Canada is up unless they get somehow rescued either with another permit extension or with immediate PR. That's what we've been seeing in Prince Edward Island. This is what we've been seeing in Brampton. Large protests that are increasing. The anger and frustration among these students is increasing. They feel as though they are they are, what's the right word? They are.
I'm thinking there. I feel like there's an entitlement because
exactly,
I've watched some of the footage of you. I've watched some of the footage of you because you went to PEI to talk to these students, and I mean, people might say, "Oh, this is gotcha journalism," but when you're on the street, you can see this. Like, how is the feeling of these protests? Now, these are obviously students that came over with the presumption that they're temporary. They're not coming over to immigrate. This is a temporary thing. They're going to be a student in Canada or a student in Canada, take those skills and go back to their home country, and that's their thing. Now, obviously, we can see what their actual intentions are by the behavior, right? They've come here, Prince Edward Island apparently being more lenient on some of the a little bit more lax on the rules on getting in the first place. And then once your foot's in the door, then it's like, maybe it'll be easier to extend, and then stay permanently. What's the feeling like when you're interviewing these people? Obviously, you sense a sense of entitlement, but like, do they feel that they're actually going to win this battle? Because obviously it's when people see this, they're confused. What are these foreigners doing in our country demanding they get to stay? They came here temporarily.
Yeah. I think they have been told along their process. They've been told before they even left. Let's just take India as the example, because almost all of the protesting students are from India. Before they got to Canada, in India, someone told them, maybe it was an education agent, told them that they would be able to get PR by just showing up. And then when they landed, they had people in their ear telling them that this is how easy it's going to be. This is how you're going to be able to get to stay. And so they have convinced themselves that they were promised somewhere along the process that they were going to become Canadians out of this whole thing. There was that promise was never given. In fact, here's something that a lot of people don't recognize. When you apply to get your student visa in Canada, regardless of whatever country you come from, it doesn't matter. If you're from England, United States, or from India or China, when you have to speak to an immigration officer, someone who represents the government, in an interview. And if you say that you plan to stay in Canada after your visa, you're not getting your visa. So all of these students with international student visas told an immigration officer that they were going to go back home when their visa expired, right? So they essentially, all these protesting students knowingly lied to an immigration officer because their intention was to stay and their intention was to become essentially Canadian. Now, going back to my original point, it's not just the students. There are outside organizations that are trying to keep all of these new students in this country. And I believe that is selling out Canadians. I believe that it is a betrayal of Canadians to let people who are supposed to leave stay and continue to cause an impact in our system. So and most of these groups are ethnic-based groups, Indian ethnic-based groups that are based in Canada. These groups, along with some politicians, including all the way up to Jagmeet Singh, have been trying to lobby the government to give all of these protesting students permanent residency, automatically permanent residency. It's an astonishing thing if that happens. They have support, but a lot of people that I speak to are afraid to speak out, but they all say, this is out of control. This can't happen. We can't be just granting permanent residency to people because they protest when they have no skills that are required in our economy. So, I mean, it's astonishing, but they do have this sense of entitlement. Someone somewhere along their process told them it was going to be easy.
Well, I learned that of the people in these programs that are graduating, which is not very many, actually, are graduating from these programs. Right. But when they do graduate, an overwhelming rate of them is in business management. As if we need a ton of business managers in Canada. Yeah. We need tradespeople. We need nurses. We need doctors. We need people with skills. Stuff that you don't get in a few months in a college. Something that takes many, many years, and there's not enough Canadians getting into it for our own domestic problems that we didn't encourage enough people to get into these for decades and decades. But nonetheless, if we are going to import people, which I'm in favor of immigration, as long as it's people who are coming to aid Canada and not coming at the detriment of Canada by taking up positions that, Canadians could obviously fill a lot of these positions. But you get into some of these organizations. So I'm guessing you're talking about some of the firms that help out with the legal, the immigration, help them fill out the paperwork for their visas. Now, you mentioned that it was ethnically based, and,
right.
And I'm curious, is this because of the influx of people from one particular region? They can get a lot of business if they speak the language. I guess it's Punjabi for a lot of these people that are coming over.
Yes. So what I was mentioning was basically there are groups called, one of them is called the Naujawan Support Network. This is just an organization that seems to be set up to assist the protesting students in Brampton. There's also the International Sikh Students Association. That's another one. And it goes all the way up to such large organizations like the World Sikh Organization, who have been lobbying the federal government to grant all these students permanent residency. You're talking about immigration consultants and immigration lawyers. That is worth the conversation, because what we see here is a group of people who are profiting directly off of this system, who are selling what's called an LMIA, upwards of $30,000 to $40,000. That is.
Well, let's get into that. Let's explain the LMIA, because the
Okay.
LMIA, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but
Yes.
it means like a permit to work that's tied to a business where
Yes.
you're stuck. You're indentured to that business, correct?
So an LMIA stands for a labor market impact assessment. Essentially, if we're going to play this legally, all right. So let's say you're an employer, Clyde, and you're trying to hire me, and I'm a foreigner. What you need to do is you need to go to the federal government and pay them $1,000 and write out a labor market impact assessment application. And this application would you would justify on this application to the federal government that you've done everything you could to hire a Canadian, but there was no Canadian that would apply to your job and be the right fit. So now you have to hire a foreigner, and that would be, in my case, me. So what's going on here? That's basically the LMIA idea, and the federal government set it up so that Canadians were put first, that employers couldn't just rush to hire foreigners at such cheap prices.
When there's a bunch of stuff there's loopholes you got to go through. So I know some businesses that have had to hire people, and they're told, like, you have to put out a help wanted thing. You have to give ample opportunity for Canadians that want the job to apply for it. And that's part of the whole thing. But it sounds like these people are using the system, and they're kind of putting the cart before the horse. They want the foreigner. They don't necessarily want the Canadians, and maybe they're even ignoring the calls that are coming in from Canadians that want the job.
Absolutely. So that's the legal side of the LMIA, but that's never really how it's put into use. What happens now is that there are immigration consultants and immigration lawyers that are actually registered by a professional college of immigration consultants. It's astonishing. They will basically preload up upwards of 20 LMIAs for a truck driver position, right? And they will get them pre-approved by the government without a name attached to it. Most of the time, an LMIA has to have a name attached. That would be my name if it was you, Clyde, who was applying to the government to hire me as a foreigner. But you can in fact apply for a blank LMIA. It only costs,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it only costs $1,000. But LMIAs in this aftermarket are going for upwards of $30,000. So someone is cashing in big. Someone is cashing in $25,000 to $29,000 every time someone gets an LMIA. And who pays for it? It's the international student. It's the newcomer who needs a job with no prior skills, probably can't even speak English, who will pay $30,000 to get a job, and that job will get them enough PR points, accumulate enough points to eventually try to make a PR application. So we have people that are coming in,
but in the process, they have like several years. They have several years where they have an indentured servant that's paying off a debt, and they're screwed. They put them in horrible circumstances, horrible living conditions, and they give them basically kids' summer jobs, and pay them very little. It's mind-boggling that this is happening in Canada.
That's right. But I also think it's important to highlight this. I haven't seen it in practice, but this is what we know is going on. But I also believe that many of these students are making the calculated decision and know exactly what they're doing, and are willingly putting themselves into this position. They're not. I don't think many of them are actually being coerced into it. I think that many of them know the equation in front of them and know what needs to be done, aren't actually either capable of accumulating the required amount of points that would make them stay in Canada. Remember, this is about your ability to speak English. It is about your ability to write, to communicate. Some of them either are incapable of it, don't want to try, and don't want to do it. and don't want to put in the effort, and they would rather just pay up the money to put themselves in this position. So yes, I think many of them are being victimized. I don't think all of them are being victimized. I think many of them know what's going
Right.
on and are putting themselves through it. This just ultimately goes back to this summer jobs fiasco that we're facing, this issue that is impacting Canadians. We're allowing this to go on, knowing that there is labor fraud, immigration fraud right in front of us that is ruining prospects for young Canadians. And the government doesn't care. The government just keeps going, and they just try to pull the wool over everyone's eyes and make sure that nobody sees the fake LMIA Instagram ads that I will sometimes post when I see them on social media, because people have to see this. It is outrageous.
So there's like a whole circuit on social media to recruit people to do these LMIs.
All of these immigration consultancies and immigration legal services, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, and they're sometimes actually on X, until usually if I find it, then I will retweet it and they get a lot of comments. But what they do is they just basically they'll do a couple of things. Sometimes, as is the case with one of these immigration consultancies, they will have a gentleman who will stand there and say, I have 25 pre-approved LMIAs for truck drivers. No English needed. This is a real video. Other times, they will have a series of videos showcasing their successes, their client success stories, such as securing student visas for Indians who have entered Canada on a visitor visa, who have come to Canada as a tourist, and these immigration consultants will flip their tourism visa for a student visa before they go home, and they've got their spot at, say, Seneca or Algoma or one of these colleges. It's all about kind of advertising your services on TikTok and on Instagram, with the hope that other people in India will see it and will say, okay, when I come to Canada, I'm going to use this gentleman's services, and I'm going to get to stay in Canada.
So my question is how is this all legal? So you're talking about committing, these are acts that are like, so for example, visa fraud, coming into Canada, saying that you're coming here for the purpose of visiting, and then changing your status immediately when you get here. That's visa fraud. Now, I know these things are hard to prove, but when you have an agency that's like putting out Instagram posts saying, come to our agency, we help you commit visa fraud, why is nobody cracking down on this? That's the serious question here.
Yeah, I mean, when it's tough to know exactly what is and isn't technically a visa fraud, and I will just say a lot of these guys, once I've started talking about them, they start to watch the videos and they start to see what I say about them. So I want to be careful. But the reality is, the reason that they're allowed to do this, Clyde, is because these lawyers and consultants have found a loophole in our system. There is a loophole that has not been closed that has allowed all of this to happen, and that if you want to go back to who's really to blame here, it's the people who have the ability to shut down these loopholes. It's the ability to it's on the people who can say, oh yeah, when you come into our country as a visitor, you don't get to change your status until you go back home. Why not? Why do we allow anything else?
That's fair.
And why do we allow any business to have an LMIA, a blank LMIA without an actual applicant's name, right? Why do we allow a business to end up holding 13 or 14 truck driver LMIAs or dishwasher LMIAs? I don't believe for a second that you couldn't find 4 16-year-olds who would do a dishwasher job. I just don't, that are Canadian. You know, and here's
Well,
the other thing.
you would eventually. So it is hard. Like, it is hard. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that have businesses and they're struggling to find young people that want to do jobs. And there's a myriad of different reasons for it. There's, they just don't wanna. They're not being forced to. Parents are not encouraging kids to go out and get jobs. But then also, there's not enough economic incentive. Like, you're not getting a huge pay for a lot of these jobs. So a lot of kids are like, yeah, it's not worth my time, which is terrible, because I don't think that's the point of getting a summer job. I'm going to encourage my kids vociferously, I guess is the word, when it comes time for them to get summer jobs, because the real value in it is not the pay. The real value in it is instilling work ethic and learning from, being in a position where you can't just say, you're not the boss of me. Well, you are the boss of me. Okay, I got to do what I got to do. And this is the learning curve that an entry level position should have. It shouldn't be a person who's raising a family on an entry level position job. But then this gets into further protestation, where these, people who are working in these lines of work then start protesting the government for raises in minimum wage and things like that, which lead to more economic downturn. And what's all the purpose? It's because we're fitting people in the wrong lines of work, and we're doing it for all the wrong reasons. And at the end of the day, what is really the ultimate goal here?
I'm really not sure what the ultimate goal is, because the more you think about it, the less it becomes obvious, or the tougher it becomes to try to find a target of what the real idea behind it is. But I will say this: I think that we're now at a point with these what you would consider to be entry level jobs, right? Let's take a fast food restaurant, or something in a similar space. We're now at the point in most major cities and smaller cities in this country that those jobs, a lot of young Canadians know that actually most of those jobs are already taken by international students. If you go if you patronize these businesses, you know what I'm talking about. You go to Tim Hortons, you know what I'm talking about. You go to grocery stores, larger department stores, you know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of young Canadians look at that and say, Am I going to be the only Canadian working this job? Is it really actually going to be the case? Is it going to be the case that I might not even be able to properly communicate with my fellow coworkers because many of these people don't even properly speak English? We're now at a point where I think that's actually coming into mind for a lot of young Canadians. Everyone can see it. And it would cross my mind if I were 16 and I were looking for a summer job. It would. Because that's what I see whatever is around me. That is one thing that I think is taking place. I think another thing is that with this influx of international students that are working in these jobs, well, there isn't really any need to keep these salaries at a competitive level. You have so many people coming in that are desperate to work, that need the work, that you're not actually incentivizing young Canadians to work these jobs who should be working these jobs, because businesses can keep some of these salaries quite low. I know that's not the case everywhere, but I think that's happening. I mean, just just do the math. I mean, if you have a large number of people that are needing this job, well, you don't have a need to raise the salary for that job. So I think that's also a factor. Ultimately, it really is a major problem. And Canadians are starting to speak out about it. But, I want to go back to something you said, Clyde, that we've been conditioned to basically say, that any talk about this could be dangerous because it could be deemed as racist, and it could be, we could be labeled as, xenophobic for opposing mass immigration. And it makes it more difficult when a significant number of those people come from one country. Right? It's not our choice. It wasn't our decision that over 50% of them, it feels like, have come from India. That's the case. But the reality is,
in one particular province of India, exactly. It's not even really like that's exactly. Unusual. It's very unusual.
It's very strange. But that's the situation we have. And we can either look at it and say, well, if we speak out about this, it's just going to be bad for us. Or we can say, no, this is not right. This is not normal. Our futures matter. The future that I want for my children and my grandchildren is of concern to me. And I know that many Canadians share that same concern for their future generations. So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be spoken up about. And who cares what people call us at this point? Because it actually matters. I know there are plenty of Indo-Canadians who are just as upset about this, maybe even more so than I am. So I don't care what people want to call me. There's no time at this point to waste for it.
Yeah, well, I've had Darshan Maharaja on the show,
Right.
and he's been here for decades and decades, and he says the influx of young men in one particular region of the country, all from one place where they all speak the same language, and there's not much of an incentive for them to pick up English or French or whatever it happens to be in that region. It creates a lot of animosity with the locals, and then it ends up trickling down, and then guys like Darshan are feeling the feedback, even though they're not part of that group. They're Canadians, just like the rest of us, and that's something that's awful. I'm going to get into some of these comments here that people have left here. Rick Yem for $5 says, I have sacrificed my whole life to end up with my tiny overpriced home, all to have this group of politicians making it so I could lose it. And this is obviously referring to what we were talking about before with the taxes that they're putting on equity on homes. We got Norm Nicholson for $20 says, lovely to have met you in Victoria. You're a sensible man that speaks up for the concerns of common Canadians, and you're more than welcome. Happy birthday! Thank you so much, and hopefully, Harrison, we see you at the event next year. It'd be great to have you part of that as well. You're so well spoken. It'd be great to have you there. RX says happy birthday, peace and love. We also have G Meister saying, Harrison, you're doing a great job. Thank you, and True North. You guys have been doing a bang up job talking about a lot of things that are almost taboo in this country, where you can actually feel comfortable reading your articles because they're not over the top, they're not tabloid, they're very well thought out, and I really appreciate the work that you guys have been doing. Linda Hunter here said, gifted membership to the channel. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. G Meister adding another comment for $20 saying, my first job at 16 was a bus boy. I cleared and set the tables, washed the dishes, made desserts and salads, and went to the basement freezer for cooks for $4 an hour. And I was happy to learn what hard work was. And that's essentially what we all should be doing. And that a lot of those opportunities are being taken away from people. And this is what we're really talking about in this scenario. At least this is what I'm talking about. This is what it seems like you've been bringing forward with your coverage. Can you tell people where to find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on X at Harry_Faulkner, and you can find my work at True North. That would be at tnc.news. You can find it on YouTube, Rumble, if you're lucky, Facebook, but we know Canadians don't really have access to that anymore. And where else? That would be about it. I have new content that goes up on Mondays and Thursdays. And we have a weekday, a middle of the week podcast, usually Tuesday or Wednesday.
That's been a bang up job you've been doing. It's really, really fantastic. And glad to see you going out on Tenet with Lauren Southern. That was a fantastic thing. Lauren's going to be in here soon. I'm not sure when, but she'll be popping in. You guys did a fantastic job with that. I mean, I encourage people on social media. I also left the link in the description of this video to go over there, check that out. Again, you guys have been doing tremendous work, bringing light to this whole situation where is a media blackout, is a complete media blackout on essentially immigration and all of that. So again, Harrison, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I wish you the best, and hope to have you back again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Clyde. Enjoy the weekend.
All right. Cheers, brother.